Hey guys, and thanks for joining us once again. This is Brandon Biggers. So I've got Kelly Dennis here as well. You want to say hi, Kelly?
Hi everybody, this is Kelly, obviously.
Yeah,
Duh.
you can tell by the Kelly voice that's coming out of his mouth. But in our last video, we focused on the first half of our most recent organized play season for FanZ OP5, and we had several events that went off, and then toward about two-thirds of the way through that season, we had an emergency CRD that hit, and it really shook a lot of things up. You want to take us through that, Kelly?
Yeah, I can do that. So, where we left off I was about to say last week, but we left off with part one.
Last time on Dragon
We,
Ball Z.
yeah, we left off with Isekai, and we were talking about how pervasive, namely these top three problem decks were: Knowledge Dende, Tag Gogeta, and Adaptive Goku. Less so Gogeta, but more so Knowledge Dende, Knowledge as a whole, because Knowledge Piccolo was still very good. But Knowledge Dende and Adaptive Goku effectively got wiped off the face of the earth. Some other one-off cards got hit, and some other decks got soft nerfs, but the primary target of this CRD were those two decks.
Right, and so as a result, we had Blue Protective, Orange Adaptive, and Namekian Knowledge Masteries all frozen. We had Orange Freezing Drill changed to Orange Adept Mastery only. We had Orange Attraction Drill changed to Orange Combative Mastery only. Super Shenron was restricted to God Trait only. The last little bit was kind of a soft nerf to Gogeta, which was that you can no longer play Vegeta the Crown Prince outside of Saiyan style. So Tag Gogeta now is required to run the set one Villain Vegeta. Which have you tried Villain Vegeta? Have you tried that? Just bringing up the old
I,
meme. But,
as you started that, I felt like you were asking a legitimate question. Then halfway through, I'm like, oh crap! All right, he's going the meme route. But I mean, it is a legitimate question. I did a little bit of testing with Gogeta following that. I think that soft nerf has slowed it down a little bit. And what I mean by slowing down is with the removal of Crown Prince from Gogeta, you no longer have that level 1 attack immediately available to you at the start of the game. You do still get the anger boost because Crown Prince and Premier have that extra anger built in, but you lose the attack, you lose the action, but I think more importantly, you lose your wall breaker answer because Crown Prince, that physical deals crit when it comes in,
Mhm.
and it's going to be one of your lighter attacks. So more likely than not, it's going to land, and wall breaker gets knocked off. So anyway, in short, yeah, it slows down the deck a little bit, but it doesn't kill it in its tracks. And
Right.
as we'll see later throughout the season, particularly with Eric Johnson and a couple of events who continue to do well with Gogeta, we'll see him still appear. So the deck still exists, it still can thrive, but I think it got a little bit of like a fairness tweak, if you will.
I agree. And just that. I mean, obviously this was designed to cripple Knowledge Dende and Goku, like you said. Adaptive, honestly, has been a problem mastery for a long time, especially as orange card quality has increased over time. And specifically, adaptive mastery coupled with attraction drill basically made this impenetrable wall that I mean, orange can run a silver bullet drill and you can't touch it because attraction drill is out, so you have to have two removal cards to effectively deal with whatever is chapping your khakis in whatever matchup. So
Yeah.
it is very frustrating. I can speak from experience playing against Kevin's adaptive Goku. It was extremely frustrating, and there was a lot of community outcry against both Dende and Goku. So Joey kind of answered the call there. I think those were really uh, good choices, and I feel like it really opened our meta quite a bit. I think there's a lot of hidden value in the Super Shenron nerf. Overall, I feel like it really hurt those Namekian ally decks that had an answer to get those allies out of banished. But I don't think it slowed down Ginyu too much.
No, it did. Well, I mean, we're gonna talk about it later when we get to North Kai. I thought limiting Super Shenron to God traits only. One, I think it was needed. Some people would say, sorry, no offense, Jeff Sosa, love you, but some people would probably say the card shouldn't exist. It provides a little bit too much protection to allies where there is already healthy level of either protection or recovery of allies out there in most of the styles throughout the game. At the end of the day, I think restricting the ally to gods only, there's a little bit of flavor there. It's a godly being. So I think restricting it with a little bit of flavor to give god MPs access to it, I think that's okay.
I don't know if it was a needed change, but it was a good change. And kind of leading into South Kai, and it was a little controversial because the CRD dropped 3 days before South Kai, and Joey went against um, the common time frame to say that the CRD would be legal at South Kai, which I think that's a good choice. I think that he responded to community feedback in a good way, and really took down a lot of the decks that were making it very unfun. And yeah, despite the outcry from a few people who had to quickly find a new deck, I think we see some interesting takeaways from South Kai.
I would agree the meta was in dire straits and the nerf was absolutely needed. And I, in particular, appreciate it quite a bit because I was already in route. I live in Philly. I was in Baltimore for work that week. So when the CRD dropped, I was already in Baltimore. I was away from home. I already had all my decks packed. So one, I saw the CRD. I was thrilled because of these changes, especially freezing of adaptive and knowledge. I have been clamoring for a really long time. But then once it settled in, I realized, shit, I already packed all my decks, so I gotta like figure something out. And at the end of the day, that wasn't that big of a deal because I was more thrilled with the changes than the time it inconvenienced me. So I had like 16 decks packed with me, so it's not like I was short of decks to pick from. I thought the timing was great. There are needed changes, and when you are kind of knocking down some of the top tier decks, some of the decks that are at tier zero status, when you bring them back down to earth where you eliminate them entirely. I'm in support of that when they're unhealthy, which what they were.
Well,
Um,
and so looking at our breakdown for the top eight at South Kai, I think it becomes pretty clear that people relied on something that they knew would bring some consistency, and some people just threw threw some deck combos at the wall, and it's a really interesting top cut. The winner of that event was Joey with Red Ruthless Vegeta. Second place was Oppressive Vegeta, piloted by our good buddy Dan Behe. Eric Johnson, I guess the Gujita nerfs were enough to push him off of that deck, and he went with Ramp Vegeta. Um, Bringing in fourth was Ascension Roshi with You, Good Sir. Um, but one of the really interesting things that I see here is just we have three Vegeta decks that are all vastly different.
Yeah, and I think what that demonstrates is the flexibility, the diversity that MP brings. I mean, he's fairly, I don't want to say straightforward, but there's a lot of inherent raw power built into his stack, in particular the super stack. And depending on the deck that you're running, you may draw from his Awakening stack, which is what we see with Dan Behe's Oppressive Vegeta with free Vegeta level 3. But overall, I think it's his newer levels, his more recent support, and his name suite is just top tier. It's among the best of any NP that is existing right now. And again, this event is a representation of that variability. You can build in a lot of different ways. The floor with each one is going to be rather high.
And there's just a ton of answers between his name cards. He's a good MP to bring when you don't know what you're gonna see. When you're struggling to figure out what's gonna happen, Vegeta offers you some consistency. I mean, it is a straightforward deck, and even Oppressive Vegeta, which plays the game a little bit differently, he's looking to punch you and then duck out of combat. But that's a deck that he has a lot of experience with. It's a go to for him. He actually ran the same deck the previous year at South Kai. it seems like it seems like with things really up in the air, players resorted to what they felt comfortable with or that would be generically strong.
In addition, I mean, we were South guys coming right off of the CRD, so people are going to run or going to lean on decks that are a bit more straightforward, a bit safer, as you put it. But then at the same time, it's compounded by the fact that we're looking at the South. The South is a region that is historically very aggressive. You'll have some players who are a bit more in that mid-range, the combo. The players I'm thinking of, so like Axel or Dan Behe and Brandon apparently, and you apparently don't necessarily fall into that southern aggressive group that I'm thinking of. But for the most part, the South is the most aggressive region of all the regions that still play. When I look at the breakdown, I'm not surprised to see all this Vegeta. It's one of the reasons that I came in with Ascension Roshi because I was expecting an aggressive meta. I wanted to come in with something that could handle that. Now, in hindsight, did I expect Vegeta, and get prideful challenged? Literally more combats than not. No, that is not what I planned on doing. But still, in hindsight, yeah, I think we see the simplicity in terms of MP choice in the breakdown as a result of the CRD, and then also compounded by the fact that the South is just overly aggressive.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if that factored into your decision with Roshi there. Just being able to push multiple win cons and generate advantage off of someone attacking you. Um, little surprised we didn't see any Krillin here. Krillin sort of escaped unscathed, but like you said, maybe it's just a case of a an aggressive meta regionally.
Yeah, I thought so. Going in, I contemplated going the Krillin route, but I have not used him, and I probably because I usually push against the upper tier MPs, which Krillin has resided in the for the entire existence of this game.
Yeah,
So I tend to push against that. Not in the absolute, but for the most part, I try and steer away from those sorts of MPs. Although he would have succeeded in that environment. He's a very defensive MP, and going into an aggressive meta, you're going to capitalize if you're coming in with an overly defensive MP. But I mean, I end up going the Roshi route. I have experience with him. I have a lot of experience with him, and particularly Ascension Roshi. I've had tournament success winning one of the UOP tournaments back in COVID days. With knowledge out of the picture, you can safely run Red Ball. That's a reflection of the aggro meta, and then post CRD, I felt like Ascension Roshi was one of those decks that was primed to step back up into the stage, into the ring. I don't know.
oh yeah. I see what you're saying.
I'll,
He's ready to
I'll
take center stage. One could
exactly
argue it
center
might be a
stage.
breeze for him to take center stage once more.
I was waiting for you to make that joke because
Well,
that UOP tournament I
the
was
wait is
speaking of.
over, baby. Like I made the joke for you. So
Yeah. No, that UOP tournament is what gave birth to um
breeze without
that partic
challenge.
that particular comment. And still to this day I don't know what part of my drunken mind found those words and put them together in such a fashion, but whatever.
Makes for a
Whatever.
good story, for sure. Well, then a couple weeks after South Kai, we hit North Kai, an event rife with controversy, but that's been well documented. So I don't know that we need to discuss two turn gate yet again. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, that's been put to bed. The public and private conversations have taken place, and obviously we can all, do better with rest and not going into tournaments too hungover or jet lagged or whatever.
yeah,
Lessons learned, but at the end of the day, we all absolutely value the integrity and fairness of the game. So
yeah.
there's nothing intentional, nothing nefarious going on. Just sleep deprivation, jet lag, our pain. But anyway, yeah,
And we play a complicated game with a lot of rules, a lot of intricacies. It does take a lot of brain power. And I mean, at the end of the day, when you've played game after game after game and your combats are extended by tons of actions, we all make mistakes. We try not to the best of our ability. It's one of those things that had it been caught, you would have been disqualified. But kind of how the ball rolls sometimes, I guess. So North Kai Breakdown was a little bit more interesting. It seems like people rediscovered a couple of MPs here. So Boo really peaked out and had some dominant games that we saw on stream. Obviously, you won the event with Blue Unity Ginyu. In fact, our top three decks were Blue decks. So we had Unity Ginyu, Resolute Boo, piloted by Ryan, and then Mimicry Boo, piloted by Chris Humphreys. It looks like some people were kind of rediscovering some things in the wake of the CRD here.
Yeah, that's what yeah, I felt the same way. I mean, looking at the breakdown, there's a lot of blue here, and you would think that blue dominated that meta for that tournament, but no, I mean, there was a lot of representation from all the styles at that tournament. And given the fact that there were about 20, somewhere between 20 and 25 people, it was a very healthy meta. It was one of the more competitive tournaments that I participated in throughout the course of the season. And, the caliber of play was super high.
I think it's
God,
interesting because I mean we see all three legal blue masteries here. Is there a fourth mastery? Tag. No, we have all four blue masteries in our top eight here. So, I guess the days of blue kind of being the stepchild of the style pie is maybe gone. But yeah, Unity, Resolute, Mimicry, and Tag all made a showing here. I feel like people kind of sleep on Boo a lot. Would you agree?
they do. Well, when you ask that question, I believe you're referring to Hero Boo.
I
Well, I
think
guess like
I think
Boo
we
in
sleep
general.
on both of them. Honestly, they're both really strong MPs.
Where I was headed with that is, I assume you're referring to Hero Boo, and I was going to make a comment about, everyone not named Henry
Yeah.
are sleeping
Oh,
on Hero Boo,
Henry
and
and Casey are well aware of Hero Boo, I think,
yeah,
and Ryan, obviously. So maybe everybody else is just sort of in the dark on that one.
yeah. I mean, he's really strong. I mean, we spoke to some of his strengths last week when we were talking about Hero Boo having a good matchup with Gogeta. I think both brands of Boo, both villain and hero, are slept on by a lot of people. I don't know. Maybe it's just the state of the game as it is. There's not too much incentive for people to experiment with decks other than what they're comfortable with. So maybe that's one of the reasons that both brands of Boo get slept on. But they're both super strong in a wide variety of decks and archetypes and whatnot. I mean, Boo's probably one of the most versatile MPs in the game. He's got three three villain stacks and one hero stack, and you can mix and match all the villain stacks to your heart's desire to craft whatever sort of build that you want.
Yeah, I think I'm inclined to agree with you. Yeah, so I guess I mean there are some MPs who definitely are given their time to shine now that Goku and Dende are out of the picture. Boo being one. I feel like there was a pretty large absence of Ginyu in most of the events this season, despite the fact that he is very strong in multiple styles.
Yeah, I don't really know. I know you and I have talked about that on and off throughout the season, and even as we were kind of like running up to record this, I don't really have an answer for that. Who knows? You obviously had success with him at East Kai. Beyond that, I mean, I think that may have been the only time Ginyu had stepped in and made top cut at an event.
I mean, you and I are the ones who topped with Ginyu this season, and that to me is kind of surprising. I do think that I probably finish really highly at East Kai, if not for Adaptive Goku. For people who don't know the story, I was smashing Kevin's face in testing for like a month. Everything he threw at it, and so he ran Adaptive Goku and added Driving Drill, which means my allies are just scraps of paper on the table,
Yep.
no actions for those guys, and so that was that shuts off support fire. I digress, but yeah, he made a great call with a card and knocked me out of top cut as a result, and I think if Adaptive Goku had had less of a presence, that Unity Ginyu was primed to make some really strong showings, and I think you proved that in this event.
Thinking back to maybe the fall or late summer, I don't know, when Universal Clash dropped,
Mm-hmm.
you and I had been working on a Unity Ginyu shell. I think was a little bit different from maybe what other people were building.
Yep.
I don't know. It's. I mean, without the lack of representation Ginyu had in the OP season, I guess it's hard to tell. So that point's kind of moot. What you and I have been working on was
I think that
where
I mean we were both relying on Raditz ally. I think that that's kind of what made our shell a little bit different.
yes, that is exactly where I was going. I was looking for the word engine. So when you and I had been pulling the deck together, granted, when you think Ginyu, you think the Ginyu allies, in particular Goldo, is the engine and what gets that deck moving. But really, it's Raditz who can access the setup suite that you have in a deck. That setup suite is going to give you more consistency in keeping your allies on the board, like pose or battle readiness.
Hmm.
And second, he gives you the flexibility that you need in different matchups where we ran blue blockade, but then we also ran blue key build.
Yep.
So if we're going up against a more aggressive deck, in that moment, if we need a little bit of a defensive boost, you go get blockade. Otherwise, if you're trying to push damage and shut the game down, you go get key build. So Raditz giving you that flexibility to go either left or right, defensive or offensive, depending on what that moment in the game calls for. Just accessing those setups gives you so much stability.
And our lists were a little bit different. I know that you added Blue Slide to your list, which is something. Yeah, I mean that's a card that gets forgotten all the time. But like I know in my list, I think I used Blue Takedown in those slots at East Kai, and I think Blue Slide is the superior choice in this meta.
So the story behind that, when I flew out to Colorado, I had a short list of decks in mind that I was going to run. On that short list, Ginyu was nowhere. Ginyu was nowhere on that list. I was I was contemplating a Sentinel Roshi with Earth Balls instead of Namek. I was contemplating Radiant Slug, which I had been talking with Wayne and getting more accustomed to. To be totally honest, I was terrified that Eric Inge was going to be there with combative trunks, and that deck is just an impenetrable wall of slow, methodical, watching paint dry on the other side. I
Hmm.
did not want to deal with that, so I was leading on the Earthball rail in some way, shape, or form. The more and more we tested, the more and more I tested on Octagon, and the more I tested live in person. I was like, all right, these decks I just don't feel super comfortable with, and I feel like I wanted to use something different. Than Roshi. I just used Roshi as South Kai. So fast forward to North Kai. I think I called you. Tournament started maybe 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock local
Hmm.
time,
Yep.
and I called you maybe 25, 30 minutes before the event start. Before the event started, I was like, I don't know what to do. I'm leading you to begin you. I think I want to do this. How do we clean up this list? Not clean up. It was already pretty intact, but I wasn't feeling too strong about it because I had maybe two, three live games in with Unity Ginyu, which apparently is me showing up with a deck with like next to no live testing is a trend for me this season. But you and I were talking about it, and to be totally honest, I had Andrew Bjernstad in mind with knowing TN was going to be there,
Hmm.
and as well as Piccolo's. So I thought, oh, and Gogeta. So I was thinking, all right, Blue Slide needs to get in this list in some way, shape, or form, and I think it actually is. I took Takedown out. It actually it was either Blue Takedown and Blue Lunar Ray that I took out and it slit, and I added three Blue Slide, and they paid dividends throughout the tournament. Not just the two-turn situation in top eight, but they paid dividends throughout the entirety of the tournament, and that card is absolutely slept on.
You see a lot of decks in this top eight that I think escaped the CRD. Gohan wasn't touched really, other than Super Shenron, and obviously Trevor is not running the ally variant of that deck.
Hmm.
Tien has been strong forever, and he, not hurt by the CRD at all. In fact, probably boosted by the fact that Adaptive Goku is not around anymore, and Sweeping Blast is not lurking around every corner. Um,
Right. Yeah.
Piccolo, nothing happened to Piccolo, and Gogeta obviously was slowed, but really not enough to knock him out of the top eight. So, North Kai, I feel like, kind of gives us a representative of the meta starting to take shape here.
Yeah, and I have a couple final points on North Kai as a whole. Ryan with Resolute Boo absolutely eviscerated me in Swiss. I think he beat me down in maybe 12 minutes. Fast forward to the finals where I don't think I'm ever gonna draw that much gas in any game ever again. If there is any destiny calling with the way my draws were in that finals game compared to what they were relative to Ryan and Swiss, I'm never going to be able to experience that again. His Resolute Boo is really finely tuned. The other point I will make, you were highlighting Unity. Uh, I don't know if there's a mastery in this game that I'm more in love with right now than Unity. This even goes back to when it first dropped. There was a lot of hate, a lot of negative feedback. It did not come out with the support that was necessary, and every time you read the mastery, you would think like, "Oh, is that too ally threshold a little too low?" And then you get these wonky interactions with Blue Arrest and Blue Clash, other style cards that tutor allies. But then if you have two allies in the field, those attacks hit, then you can only get one ally as opposed
Yeah.
to two allies. The time is a little wonky, but I think with where it stands now, people have been dabbling with it enough to see its ceiling, which I think is super high. It provides an avenue for beats, it provides an avenue for defensive decks, it provides an avenue for whatever combo deck you want to build where you're leveraging allies. I think I sacked you the other day on Octagon with a particular Unity build that I've been working with lately that absolutely leans
Yeah.
into that mastery
Yeah.
super hard. Point point being, Unity is a super strong, flexible mastery that can be used in so many different capacities right now. And I think its ceiling is still yet to be seen.
I agree. Well, that rounded out the Kais, and then we had one final power level event that happened. We actually did also have a Houston event, but we don't have any stats on that event. I don't believe those were posted to the blog. But we're going to talk about Ghouls 4, which is a Ghouls 3 actually never happened. So this is Ghouls 3, Ghouls 4. Um, Ghouls 3 colon the fourth one. I don't know. We're gonna workshop that and come up with a great name for it. But thanks to Mark Bulger putting on this event periodically. This one ended up being a lot more competitive than I expected.
Yeah, what was it? What was it that you submitted for this fun, non-competitive event that you were expecting? Granted,
Yeah.
I was also
Uh,
expecting, but
so, um, so speaking of Unity, I entered with Unity Hit, and I knew that my build was not ideal, but I was like, it's a fun event. I'll just kick it around and come up with some card choices. And if that were a physical deck, I would have walked it out to a dumpster and threw it with much force
I
after my showing.
think
But
there was a particular card you did not run three of in that deck.
uh, I don't know. I felt very betrayed by forgetting it.
And you got paired with the board deck round one and scooped immediately.
I think it was every round. I think every round I faced some form of like either allies, setups. Like it was a mess, man. But yeah, but enough about that. Um, I mean, we had a 14-person octagon tournament, and our top four ended up being the man, the myth, the legend, Eric NG with meditative Beerus. God, I hate that deck. And then Kelly came in second place with enhanced Broly, your baby who like fell down some stairs and got some brain damage. Um,
Yeah.
and then Kevin took third with empowered future Gohan, and Ryan O'Malley rounded it out, showing us the versatility of Boo once again with red ruthless villain Boo.
Yeah. So the first thing that comes to mind is I'm pretty sure this Ghoul series started as just a meme or just Mark messing around on retro.
Yeah,
Oh, surprisingly, through the iterations of this event, I feel like the number of people who actually attend and then to just the competition we see in these events are I feel like it kind of rivals the OLT that Kevin runs
definitely.
every now and then. So it ties into your point. that yeah, you walked in with this not very competitive deck and were just kind of blown out of the water as a result. So yeah, I mean, credit where credit's due. Appreciate Mark for pulling these tournaments together and turning them into something legitimate to keep things moving. In between the more formal official OP events, but at any rate, there are really two decks I want to highlight, and you might feel the same way. There are two decks I want to highlight in this tournament. One first is Meditative Beerus, and sorry Eric, we love you, but I don't think either of us are going to have any nice things to say about that deck. And then second is Ryan's Ruthless Boo.
Yeah, Meditative Beerus is a monster. God, it feels like a pile when you look at Eric's deck list. And then, I feel like you have to play against it to really see all of the interactions and all of the synergy that he's built in there. There are two people I would trust to pilot this deck effectively, and they are Eric and Dan Behe. Because it is just, I mean, it can feel so oppressive at times because it's like it has answers to your answers, and it is a slow burn. You are going to be playing for an hour, and you are going to hate every second of it. Yeah, it is. It is rough. So if you have not had the displeasure of facing Meditative Beerus, you can count your lucky stars that Eric lives all the way out in California and did not manage to make it to more events this season.
You are well acquainted with my feelings around the meditative mastery. I'm not gonna dig. I'm not gonna go. I'm not gonna go down. I'm not gonna go down that rabbit hole here
Please do
because
not.
I've vented about it with plenty of people since it came out. So I just know I'm not the biggest fan of the mastery. It has an outlet to everything. Combat enders are all over the place, which is fine.
It's
There's a unique level of displeasure that exists when your opponent doesn't just rip cards that are important to the engine of your deck. It's when it does it from the get go, where the mastery dictates and telegraphs, hey, I'm going to steal all your good stuff. You are basically going to be driving your car down the highway without wheels, without axles. You're just going at whatever pace gravity and momentum will allow you to go.
I think if you expect anything with a specific engine, Meditative is just going to beat it hands down because you can just pick out the cards that are necessary to the win condition. I think Meditative can really struggle versus aggressive decks if it doesn't see the combat enders, if those decks have a lot of removal, because I mean, if we're being honest, pulling six cards out of a red ruthless deck is way different than pulling six cards out of, I don't know. I can't think of of anything specifically right now, but something that relies on those few key cards to function well. So it does have its weaknesses, but with a good pilot, meditative Beerus specifically, but a lot of meditative decks like Raditz, I would put Roshi in that category as well. Um, I mean, they can feel very overwhelming. And it's kind of surprising that we didn't see more black this season.
What I'll add to meditative is the ceiling can be astronomically high depending on whose hands that deck is sitting in. That pilot is going to be able to rip away the most valuable cards in their opponent's deck. And sometimes those most valuable cards are not going to be the most straightforward cards. There are a slew of complex combo decks that are out there where if you have not sat across, if you have not used the deck yourself, you're not going to know right away what the key cards are. Or the more you know about your opponent's deck, the better.
Yep.
The ceiling for you is going to be higher because you're going to know what to look for. You're going to know what to pick out of their deck, and on top of that, you're just sometimes a bit of a low margin type of deck to run. So you're going to be counting cards throughout the game too. What's in their hand? What's in their piles? What's currently in play? What are the odds that they have XYZ card in their hand relative to what you've seen throughout the accumulation of turns throughout the game? You're going to be able to perform that much better.
I agree. The other deck that we were talking about highlighting was Red Ruthless Boo, which I believe he did all Fat Boo villain stack.
I think so. Ryan's a big Fat Boo fan, and if I recall correctly, he was not going to enter the tournament, and I think several of us were just trying to convince him to enter,
Yeah.
and just basically dragged him into the tournament, and he ends up making top four and almost beat Eric in top four.
Yeah, he did. That was a very close game. It was a very close game, and of course he's running Fat 3, which is very very strong in that matchup because the ability to tutor a treat and immediately get rid of a threat is it's just very very powerful in general. I think that that Fat Boo 3 kind of gets forgotten sometimes, but I mean it's a fantastic removal engine, not to mention high AT across boost stacks. I think obviously the one weakness running a non-Saiyan Ruthless deck is you lose out on Suppressive Strike. So
Yeah.
so your opponent has more, and I think that did really hurt Ryan in this matchup because Eric was able to end combat over and over and over again as soon as he was pressing momentum. So
Yeah, yeah, that was definitely a problem. And I know when we were talking to Ryan throughout the tournament, and then especially after we wrapped up, I think, sure, he doesn't have access to Suppressive Strike, but Stomach Crusher is also an option. Stomach Crusher being one of those older cards that has historically been overlooked, but for a variety of reasons have kind of come back to the forefront of the meta, and you can see him play with that card much more lately. And I think, yeah, unfortunately, I know Ryan was kicking himself for not running Stomach Crusher. Because
mm-hmm.
had he run Stomach Crusher in that matchup, it would have made, world of a difference. But, super happy Ryan was able to, bring one of his pet decks in here and do really well with it in a very competitive tournament.
Definitely. And just one final note I want to make. Wayne did enter this tournament with Empowered Piccolo, and he went 0-2 and dropped in this event. So I don't know. Like I feel like that really speaks to the balance of the meta. I feel like every deck at this point has a weakness, and honestly, as we look through these top cut lists after the CRD, I mean, you see that there's a wide variety of viable decks. I feel like honestly, this might be the healthiest the game has ever been at this point in
Uh,
time because there's just
so,
so many options that are viable, and it's like anything can knock anything off right now.
right, so you're not just trying to throw shade at Wayne, are you, Brandon?
I am not. Well, I mean, he won Supreme Kai with Empowered Piccolo. He won TOP with Empowered Piccolo. And I guess my point would be, that the winning deck in the hands of the winning player went 0-2 drop in ghouls. So
Yeah.
I mean, it can happen to anybody. Is my point. And so
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's important to remember because it's not like I feel like we don't have an adaptive Goku right now. We don't have a knowledge Dende right now where there's just something that's just feels insurmountable to play against.
We don't need it.
No, we don't. Not at
We
all.
absolutely do
Please do
not. We
not give us
absolutely do
another
not need it.
one. I know Paul wants that to be Goku Black, but please don't.
Kidding, sarcasm, kidding and sarcasm aside. No, I agree with the point that you're trying to make, and yeah, I mean, I was surprised a deck like Empower Piccolo went 0-2 drop, but I mean that kind of feeds into the point that you're making that the meta is very healthy right now.
I agree with you, and I'm excited to see the direction that we go in, and to see what our next set MPs contribute to this as well, because yeah, even as we go into TOP in our next episode, I mean there's a really wide variance there as well. There are definitely decks that people believe in, decks that can take people by surprise, and even our tier 1 tier 0 builds. I mean, you can get waylaid by things. You're not invincible anymore. So strong meta, and honestly, a pretty fun OP season overall. I feel. Well, guys, that's going to do it for our recap of part 2 of the OP5 season. Please join us next time when we break down the Tournament of Power. Take it easy.